Hey everybody, this is Greg-Petix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the Petixonian Institute of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at two delicious comics from the early 90s. Curse of the Molemen and Blood Club, both by Charles Burns. These were put out by Kitchen Sink Comics, total deluxe treatment, heavy cardstock covers, beautiful full color, full process coloring, nice paper. These were such nice little packages. They only put out two of them. See, they numbered them. This was going to be a series. And on the back cover of the last one, of Blood Club, they talk about there was supposed to be Teen Plague and Mondo Zeno, which never came out, which really makes me sad, because these are wonderful. I love this format. It's worth the $4.95. That's what it was originally. This is a time when most comics, I think, were like $1.25, $1.50, the early 90s, as far as like normal comics. But this is so worth it. These are just deluxe, beautiful, beautiful comics. And they're Charles Burns. It was just a fucking genius. So let's start with Curse of the Molemen. I wish you could feel this cover with me. I wish I had some kind of technology. It's just nice cardstock, really good stuff. So this is part of his early 80s stories, Big Baby. This Curse of the Molemen was created in the mid 80s, I believe 86. But this is reprinted and color was added. Great cover here. God, Charles Burns is so creepy. You guys probably all know Charles Burns. Came to prominence in Raw magazine. He's done so many great graphic novels and stuff. Black Hole. I love this deluxe, nice little title 2-pager. So, very first page, we see Big Baby, Tony Del Monte. He's just this normal kid in like suburban America, but he's kind of looks like a mutant. But other than that, his life is very normal, So he sees these two workmen digging a big hole in the ground next door at his neighbor's house. And he says, what are you guys doing? And this guy, decides to tease him a little. He's like, it's a secret, kid, but we're looking for monster treasure. And Tony wants to help. He says, can I get my shovel and help? And then the owner of the house, Tony's neighbor, he says, Tony, leave these men alone. Don't give me any of your back talk. Just climb down and let these guys get back to work. And he says, your name isn't Mr. Pinkster, it's Mr. Stinkster. And I like how even the grown men laugh at him, and he runs away angry. Oh, that cracks me up. Just look at this clear line art. Beautiful. The colors are a little weird because this is the early days of computer coloring. I think some cartoonists, didn't really know what to do with it. So this is all colored by, both of these are colored by Mike Newhall. I think he worked at Kitchen Sink. So we find out from Mr. Pinker. Let me see what his name is again. Sorry. Yeah, Pinkster. We find out from his interaction with his wife inside, he's a monster. He's a jealous freak. He's abusive. And he's not a good guy. So later that night, Tony keeps looking out the window at that hole in the ground. And he sees this monster. The one from the cover. Pretty scary looking. His dad comes in and says, you've been watching too many horror movies. Do you want me to put in your nightlight? And Tony says, oh, Dad, that's baby stuff. So an hour later, he looks out again. And now that monster's taking a guy down with him. He's either unconscious or dead. He's dragging him down into the hole. So Tony wakes up his mom this time. Mom! And he says, could you plug in the nightlight? Look at this nightlight. That would keep me up. Kind of creepy. That's what Charles Burns do, though. He's good at being creepy. So the next day, Tony's playing in his yard. And he sees Mr. Pinkster in the bushes looking at his own house. He's basically trying to entrap his wife. He wants to see what his wife does when she thinks he's not around. So the salesman comes up to the house. Mr. Pinkster jumps out of the bushes and says, "Get the fuck out of here before I kick your teeth in." And then he turns around and slugs his wife. Because in his, paranoid, jealous imagination, he's like, "I saw you smiling at him. If I'd given you a few more minutes, you'd have, who knows, So now he says, "Well, I'm going to be out of town in business. If I ever found out you were seeing another man, I'd have to kill you." This guy's really horrible. So that evening, Tony's having dinner with his parents. And he tells the parents he saw this whole interaction between Mr. Pinkster and his wife. And he's telling the parents how he slugged her. And they're trying to explain it to him. And the wife says, "That man really needs to be locked up. He's off his rocker, and he keeps that poor woman a prisoner." And the husband, of course, because it's like this 50s, Leave It to Beaver milieu, he's like, "Honey, don't you think you're being a little too dramatic about this?" So he asks if he can see the Shock Theater. And the mother agrees. She says, "Isn't that after your bedtime?" And he says, "But it's Friday night." So she's like, "Okay, just no more nightmares." So he's watching Shock Theater. And it's about these, hero types. They're in the subterranean lair of these monsters, the Molemen. Yeah, I think the movie's called Claws of the Molemen. And of course, it's some cheesy, grade Z exploitation movie. There's these hot women in bathing suits that are being menaced by the mole men, and these guys are going to try to save them, I guess. But the mother sees how creepy it is and weird. She comes in and just turns the TV off. She's like, "That's a little too scary for you, Tony." I don't know why. Tony's face just makes me laugh. He looks like such a mongoloid. So she says, "I want you to go to bed." So then the heroes in the movie inspire Tony. He's like, "I got to do something about this." And so he gets a Swiss Army knife and a pillowcase so he can haul the treasure back, the monster treasure. So he goes into Mr. Pinkster's yard. And once again, Mr. Pinkster's trying to entrap his wife. He never went on that 2-day trip. He's in his car all weekend watching the house. But he's drinking and he's got a gun. And he's just making idle threats to himself, muttering, "This is not going to end well. We're heading for some disastrous shit." So Tony's in the, digging in this hole. And there's a cave-in. He falls into the ground. There's like underground chamber, and he sees that monster carrying a dude. And Tony's freaking out. So Tony hears some voices, and he sees this cage. Well, it's like a cell. And there's a guy, I think it's the same guy he saw being carried into the hole. And he says, "Maybe you're a little too young to understand. These monsters aren't male, they're female. And they kind of want to, be our husbands." Because he doesn't want to tell this little kid about, "Oh yeah, they're going to fuck us and take our seed." So the guy says, "Get out of here, kid, while you still can." So the monster comes back. And Tony takes his knife and chops off this weird antenna on his head with a little glowing nib on it. That could be a Jim Woodring panel. It's kind of weird. So the monster attacks the guy. And the guy, the last thing he says is, "Run, kid, run." Ah! So Tony runs, is climbing out of the hole. The monster's in hot pursuit. Meanwhile, the Mrs. Pinkster hears a ruckus in the backyard. And she goes down to the backyard to see what's going on. Unfortunately, Mr. Pinkster wakes up from a little alcohol-induced nap just then, and he sees the lights going on out back. The lights going on out back. And he's like, the back door, that lousy no-good bitch is letting him in through the back door. He thinks she's letting in some lovers or multiple lovers in through the back door, and he's planning on killing her. So Mrs. Pinkster is like, "Tony, you scared the living daylights out of me. What do you do? What's the matter, poor darling? Why are you crying? Everything's going to be all right." She says that just as Mr. Pinkster's aiming the gun at her. So inside Tony's house, next door, we hear blam, blam, kapow, kapow. And Tony's parents wake up. They realize that Tony's missing. And the police are already here. So they run over to the Pinkster's yard, and the husband's dead. And it turns out that she had a gun. The husband was so paranoid, he bought her a gun. So when he goes out of town on business, she'll be have some defense. So she keeps her revolver by her nightstand because she gets freaked out when he's away. And she heard a shot. The first shot missed, and she turned around before she realized it was her husband and blew him away. Then again, maybe she did realize it was her husband after the first shot, kept firing. So Tony's reunited with his parents. They're very happy that he's all right. And then the next day, we see those two workmen who were digging the hole for the pool. And now that Mrs. Pinkster's in charge, she's having them fill up the hole. She never wanted a pool. Her dead husband did. She didn't even want it. She likes the beach. And then one of the workmen says, "Check out the paper today. Wife kills husband, road accidental." And he's just like, "I'll be damned. I didn't think that skinny little broad had it in her." I like the part about her husband buying her the gun so she could protect herself. And then one of the workmen finds that antenna from that monster, the little glowing doohickey. And Tony's in a tree overlooking them, and he says, "Hey, that's mine. Can I have it back?" And he says, "Why the long face, fella?" And Tony says, "You lied about the monster treasure. You shouldn't have lied." Oh, just a perfect little comic. I fucking love this. I kind of like it in color. I mean, the original black and white is perfect, but it's not bad. This is a great back cover. It's just all this detritus of a kid from that time, what he would have like on his bedroom floor. We see a monster magazine. I was a teenage zombie. We see a little monster card, like a, Crazy Tops cards. We see horror comic book, all these crazy toys, fake spiders, action figure dolls, toy soldiers, firecrackers. Just love the detail. There's some airplane glue, model airplane glue. Great cover, great back cover. So that's Curse of the Molemen. Let's move on to Blood Club. It's a double feature after all. And this is more of the same, more greatness. All Charles Burns. Once again, colored by Mike Newhall. God, that image is just so striking. So not to be nerdy, but I gotta say, I think this takes place chronologically before Curse of the Molemen, because that Swiss Army knife that Tony was so proud of, we see the father give it to him in this comic. So, I don't know. Unfortunately, the colorist is trying to get all fancy. It just doesn't work with Charles Burns. Charles Burns is great with just having nice, flat colors. That's what he does when he colors himself. And this guy's trying to do all like computer fading and shit like that. It's a minor quibble. It's still an amazing comic, but a little grating. So Tony's going to summer camp. And that's why the dad gives him a Swiss Army knife. And the father drops him off with his best friend, Sam. And they meet all these new kids. And the guy, like, in charge of their cabin is, what's his name again? Something like, Rory. He says, call me Uncle Rory. So, you know, they do the orientation with the kids. And he points out that there's a girls' camp across the way, Camp Pocahontas. He also says there's an island out there, never been named, and nobody's allowed to go there. It's off limits. Oh, there it is, in close-up. He tells them it's haunted. So that evening, they're having a campfire, cooking some wieners, and he tells them a ghost story. And he tells them about this little boy who just wouldn't obey the camp rules. His name was Ricky Bellows. He was a attendee of the camp, summer camp, years ago. And he was just a little rascal, always flouting the rules, causing trouble. And one day he went out to the island that he wasn't supposed to. And the next day, nobody could find him. All they found was the empty boat tied up on the shore of the island. And they looked over, the cops came, they didn't find a trace of him. But then about one evening, a little while later, 2 campers came running into the main lodge crying. And they said that they saw Ricky, but he was like floating in the air 4 feet off the ground, naked and crying, with this blue light emanating from him. And, you know, he's just kind of chuckling. He's like, yep, I hope you guys know that this is what happens to little boys who break the rules and don't follow the rules. So, there's like tough boys there. I think they've been there before, so they're like the lifers. So they're going to break in the new meat. And they tell Tony and Sam that, like, we got this club and you guys got to join, called the Blood Club. You have to smoke a cigarette, take a puff of a cigarette, you got to take a gulp of booze, and you got to make this X on your forehead with your own blood. You got to prick your finger. Tony's he's kind of a big baby. He's like, I don't know if I can do it. So his friend Sam kind of like sneaks some of the blood from his finger onto Tony's finger so he can pretend that it's his, and he makes the X. So he's in. Hours later, everyone's asleep. Tony feels some dripping on his face, and it's Ricky, the ghost of Ricky, just crying onto his head. God, that is such a great image. It's so terrifying. And he's just looking at him saying, please help me, please. Weeping onto Tony. Tony screams, tells everyone what he saw. They all think he's full of shit. So then about 2 weeks later, Tony finds a Skid magazine in the bathroom, like in this little crack, a girly mag. And, you know, he's a young kid, so he's just like, ooh, this is naughty. So he hides it in the forest, and then he tells the guys, hey guys, I found something. I want to show you. So he kind of scores points with the dudes. They're all kind of like, you're pretty all right, Tony. So then the kids get so turned on basically by looking at this porno, they start talking about the girls from Camp Pocahontas, and one of them is all like, man, I'm taking a boat, I'm going over there. You know, in a couple nights, I'm going to do it. So he takes off. All the other kids are like, he's crazy, man. He's going to probably have to go to reform school if they catch him. That's big trouble. So he does get caught. I mean, they don't catch him, but they see him, and he had a ditch, and he like totally was running through the woods, and he's crying. He's just like this very harrowing night of trying to escape the other camp. So all the guys make a vow not to snitch on each other. Like, everyone keep their mouths shut. So they're interrogating all of them one by one. Everyone's keeping their mouth shut, but Tony, Tony's a big baby. And they, like, good cop, bad cop him. They wear him down. And he finally admits. Oh, before I get to that, sorry, I just want to say, here's an example of that weird coloring. Charles Burns would never do that in his color work. It's just annoying, because this is otherwise a perfect comic. It's flawless. Like, Charles Burns' art it just doesn't even look like a human drew it. It's so precise and perfect. So, Tony gives up the kid because they didn't know his name. They just knew he was from Cabin 5. Some of the girls saw the 5 numeral on his shirt. One of the kids is listening in the window, so as soon as he comes out, they know he's the Rat Fink. And they're like, you're out of the Blood Club. So, now we got a few days later, Tony's totally by himself now. Even his buddy Sam from his hometown, even he won't talk to him. So he's pretty sad. It's like, I just want to go home. But then the Blood Club say, hey, we're going to give you a chance to redeem yourself. You got to row out to that creepy island that we're not supposed to go on. And if you do, we'll let you back in the club. So he rows out there, and as he's rowing, the ghost comes back. And Tony's like, I've got a knife, leave me alone. And this sad ghost is saying, I'm always alone. It seems like I've been alone forever. Everyone hates me. I'm so lonely. I'm so cold and sad and lonely. And he says, I'm not going to hurt you, Tony. I just need your help. I want my parents to know what happened to me. All this time, he's just been a missing persons case. They never found his body. So Tony decides to help him. And as they're traipsing through this island, the ghost boy tells Tony the story. So he was kind of a problem child, this guy Ricky, always causing trouble. His father sent him to summer camp to straighten him out, maybe teach him a lesson. And, he continued his crazy, wacky ways, always trying to get a laugh out of the guys, always goofing around. So, he told, one day he saw Uncle Rory, making out with a girl from Camp Pocahontas. And he went out to the island because he saw them go out there. He was going to follow them and spy on them. So he finds them in a clearing, and they're obviously having sex. But, he's a little kid. He doesn't really know what's going on. He's like, both of them are breathing real hard and making all kinds of weird grunting sounds. It looked like they were wrestling or something. I felt kind of creepy watching them, but the longer I looked, the funnier it all seemed. So he can't help himself, but he laughs. And Rory looks up, and all of a sudden his face is contorted with rage. So he starts chasing Ricky. Excuse me. And he's basically saying, I'm going to kill you. He's really scaring. Ricky's terrified. So when he's really close, Rory reaches out to grab him. And Ricky dives to try to avoid him. Unfortunately, there's like this big clump of rocks. He dives headfirst into these rocks. And he dies. It kills him. And he sees like the light fading, and then it's just all black. And then his ghost pops out, and he's looking down at the scene. Of course, no one can see him or hear him, but he can hear Rory and his girlfriend. And he's like, we have to bury him. I'm not going to ruin my life for some stupid little jerk like him. And the girlfriend says, I refuse to help you. And Rory says, you'll help me all right, or I'll bury you right along with him. Rory's like, he seems like such a nice guy. He's a fucking monster, we find out. Really bad man. And so that's it. He's done with his story. But he's like, but you know, Tony, now you're going to tell them. He's like, nobody's going to believe me. I'm a stupid kid. I don't even have any proof. And he says, I'll give you proof. So Tony rows the boat back to the camp. God, man, I just love this as the storm's raging, the clouds. Charles Burns is so fucking good. I can't get over it. He just tells such good stories. And right when he lands on shore, fucking Rory's right there. And he says, don't worry. You know, I know the other kids set you up for this because they were mad that you squealed on them. So I'm not going to be that hard on you. And he says, what's this in your hands? He's like, "What? Come on, Tony, what do you have there?" He's like, nothing, leave me alone. It's the skull of Ricky. So Ricky led him to a shallow grave so he could bring the skull back to prove that, you know, where he's buried. So Rory says, come here, you stupid little shit. And luckily, Tony's got his Swiss Army knife and he stabs him right through the hand. Excuse me. And he runs into the office and says, give me the police. So 3 days later, the newspaper headline says, suspect in murder mystery is caught. You know, after all these years. And Rory's, Tony is at home now, reading a comic book. And the mother peeks her head in. And she says, okay, honey, I hope you feel better soon. And then he falls asleep. And then we see the ghostly voice of Rick. Good night, Tony. Thanks for everything. I'll see you in your dreams. Oh, so good. Then here's some beautiful, just a nice, beautiful black and white illo from Charles Burns. This reminds me, if you've ever read Black Hole, the comics, he did this on every one without logos or anything. Just beautiful black and white, like setting the scene. So it reminded me of that a lot. And we have this nice little back cover, kind of looking like a children's book. And pretending that it is for children. Blood Club is the newest edition in a brilliant series of picture storybooks loved by children and praised by parents and teachers all over the world. Each book in the series tells a complete, exciting story featuring Big Baby. And here we see the titles, Curse of the Molemen, Blood Club, and then these are the ones that didn't come out, Teen Plague and Mondo Zeno. God, I wish they did. I love this format. These are so nice. The cardstock covers, just beautiful. So there you have it, Curse of the Molemen and Blood Club, double feature by Charles Burns. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I guess I'll see you next time at the Petixonian Institute of Comic Book Studies.